Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take, a whole heap of insights, research, sometimes really challenging perspectives, and try to boil them down into something useful, something illuminating for you.
hmm
Because often, let's be honest, the best insights don't come from just nodding along with everyone else. Sometimes you've got to listen to the people who really push back, who challenge the common wisdom.
Absolutely. And today, that's exactly what we're doing. We are diving deep into the worldview of Mookie Tenenbaum. He's an international analyst, and his takes, well, they're often pretty different from what you hear in the mainstream news.
Yeah, really different. We're drawing from a recent, pretty wide-ranging discussion he had. He covered a lot of ground, global hotspots, the big power plays, but with this unique, almost unfiltered
Right.
lens.
So our mission today is basically to unpack his arguments. We want to look at why he reaches these conclusions, especially when they seem, a bit counterintuitive. We're connecting the dots in his worldview.
Exactly. It's like getting a shortcut to being well-informed, but from an angle you might not have considered. So this is for you, the listener, who likes digging deeper, who values those aha moments, even if they shake things up a bit.
Even if they challenge what you thought you knew.
Precisely. Get ready to look at some big global issues in a whole new light. Okay, let's jump right in. Military parades, we see them, right? Huge events, tanks rolling, missiles on display. And the message seems obvious. Look how strong we are, especially from major powers like China.
That's the standard interpretation, definitely. Projecting strength, dominance.
But Mookie Tenenbaum looks at China's recent 10-year parade and, well, he sees something completely different. It's not what most of us would think.
Yeah, it's fascinating. He just cuts right through that perception of power. He calls the whole thing theater. And obra de teatro, as he puts it. Basically, a stage play with, in his words, no importance whatsoever in terms of real power.
No importance. That's a strong claim. How does he get there? Saying it's the opposite of a power display.
Well, his core argument is about functionality. He says, look, what you see in a parade is just equipment. It's an apparatus, a tube that looks like a missile.
Okay.
Experts might identify it, sure, but you have absolutely no idea if that missile or that tank or whatever it is actually works. Does it function? Can it hit a target? The parade proves none of that.
So it's all about the visual, the spectacle, not the actual capability.
Exactly. It's appearance versus reality. You're seeing the shell, the facade, not a genuine demonstration of military effectiveness. And for Tenenbaum, that makes the whole thing, well, fundamentally meaningless as a power indicator.
Right, it's just for show. And he didn't just make this broad point, did he? He picked out some specific examples from the parade that he thought were almost laughable.
Oh, definitely. Take the cyber command they supposedly showcased. Tenenbaum's description, a gentleman sitting in front of a computer. That's it.
That's underwhelming.
Totally. He sees it as, almost quaint. He points out that in the U.S., for example, AI is already taking over many of those kinds of roles. So China presents this as cutting edge, and Tenenbaum's basically saying that's already being automated elsewhere. It's an illusion of being advanced.
And what about those robot guard dogs or wolf guards? I remember seeing something about those.
Oh, yeah, the wolf guards. He was particularly scathing about those. He dismissed them flat out as toy factory technology.
Factory technology. Ouch.
Yeah. He wasn't just being insulting, he meant it seriously. Like, this isn't real sophisticated military tech. He questioned the whole idea, sending dogs to fight. Is that really a modern military strategy?
So for him, those specific things weren't just unimpressive. They actually revealed a kind of lack of seriousness, maybe even weakness.
Exactly, superficiality.
Yeah.
Trying too hard to look advanced, but using things that, in his view, are basically gimmicks. Exposed weakness, not strength.
So Tenenbaum uses this parade, this single event, almost like a case study. He sees it not as China rising, but maybe China compensating. And this leads him to a bigger point about where China fits in the world right now, doesn't it? He groups them with Russia and North Korea in a pretty provocative way.
He does. He called them forajidos, outlaws.
Outlaws, not just authoritarian states, but actual outlaws on the world stage.
Yeah. He sees them sharing key traits. Oppressive dictatorships, engaging in imperialist policies, and operating consistently with bad faith. He literally calls them the three pariahs of the world.
Wow, that's blunt, and he backs this up with specifics for each, right? What makes them outlaws in his eyes?
Precisely. It's not just a label. For Russia, he points to the serious problems with boycotts they're facing, obviously linked to Ukraine, real economic and political isolation.
Okay.
North Korea. He sees them as basically incapable of significant legitimate action. Their main global interactions, according to him, are things like falsifying dollars, selling drugs, and selling weapons. Like a criminal enterprise, but a state.
In China, beyond the parade's theatrics.
For China, he talks about a struggle for lost prestige. And he gets very specific, highlighting their open sale of precursors of fentanyl. He connects it directly to the U.S. crisis, noting fentanyl kills 100,000 Americans every year.
That's a heavy accusation, linking them directly like that.
It is. And he implies other things, too, like the massive intellectual property theft, the aggression in the South China Sea, actions that undermine the international system, all contributing to this outlaw status.
So when these three leaders meet, like Putin visiting Xi in Beijing with maybe North Korea involved somehow, Tenenbaum doesn't see this as some powerful new axis forming.
Not at all. He dismisses it as stage setting, pure optics. He says meetings like that do not make them more threatening today than yesterday or the day before.
So no real added threat from them getting together?
In his view, no. He even suggests someone like Trump wouldn't see it as a bigger threat just because they had a summit. It's just optics. A performance by three regimes trying to look stronger together than they actually are individually. It really pushes you to question what these alliances actually mean.
It certainly challenges the narrative of a unified, powerful bloc. Okay, so if China's military displays are theater and its alliances are just stage setting, what about its future? Especially technologically. Tenenbaum's view here is, well, it's pretty dire, isn't it?
It's incredibly stark. He basically predicts an existential crisis for China, specifically tied to technology. When he says China's days are counted, he's talking about a fundamental technological barrier he believes they simply cannot overcome.
And what is that barrier specifically? It sounds like a major vulnerability.
It's artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
His core argument is that China does not have artificial intelligence and will never have it.
Never have it? That's huge. Why? What's missing?
Chips. High-end, cutting-edge semiconductor chips. He says AI, the truly powerful kind, functions on chips. And China, he asserts, does not have, nor will it ever have access to these chips.
Okay, the chip barrier. We hear a lot about this, but why does he think China can never get them? Is it just sanctions or something deeper?
It's deeper, according to Tenenbaum. That goes back to how China operates. He states quite bluntly that China does not invent in general. It copies or bribes.
That's a common criticism, but he frames it as a fundamental block here.
Exactly. He argues they lack the indigenous capability, the history of ground-up invention in this incredibly complex field of high-end chip design and manufacturing. Think about the companies involved, the global supply chains, the specialized knowledge. It's concentrated elsewhere. He says China is very far from being able to have this access to chips through their own efforts.
Yeah, so they're fundamentally dependent on external tech they can't replicate.
That's his core point.
Uh-huh.
And the reliance isn't just temporary, it's structural, based on their innovation model in his view. This creates this critical, perhaps permanent vulnerability.
And the consequences of not having these chips, not having real AI, how far-reaching does he think that is?
Catastrophic. His logic is simple and brutal. Without chips, there is no artificial intelligence. And then a knockout blow. Without artificial intelligence, there is no future.
No future. Not just military, but everything.
Everything. Military, economic, scientific. He sees AI as the foundational technology for the 21st century. Without independent capability, a nation gets left behind, period. It becomes dependent across the board. It's an incredibly pessimistic view of China's long-term prospects.
Wow. So if this is true, if China is facing this tech cliff, how does Tenenbaum interpret their current actions? The assertiveness, the parades we talked about?
He sees it all as magna desperation. Great desperation. He says Beijing is firing its last cartridges, trying desperately to impress the world, to project strength it doesn't fundamentally possess in this key area.
And the threats towards the U.S.
Right.
The rhetoric.
He views that as part of the desperation, trying to pressure, maybe even coerce, the U.S. into granting access to AI technology or easing restrictions.
Yeah.
But Tenenbaum is adamant.
Uh.
The U.S., of course, not do that.
So the parade wasn't strength, it was desperation. The alliances aren't real power, just stage setting. And the tech dreams are blocked by this chip barrier. It paints a picture of China as quite fragile, actually.
Exactly. It fundamentally challenges that image of the unstoppable technological superpower. It suggests a critical vulnerability that could reshape everything. If he's right, it forces us to completely rethink China's trajectory and what power even looks like today.
Okay, let's shift focus now. Let's go to Venezuela. We all heard about the Trump administration's moves, the talk of a military siege against drug cartels, ostensibly putting pressure on Nicolas Maduro's regime. The narrative was often about cornering Maduro.
Right, that was the headline story. targeting the regime, its illicit activities, trying to weaken its grip.
But again, Mookie Tenenbaum comes in with a completely different angle. He basically dismisses the idea that Maduro was the main target here.
Yeah, it's quite striking. He argues that Trump's actions do not affect Maduro in the way people assumed. He even says Maduro himself is not important in the context of Venezuela for the U.S. strategy at that moment.
Not important. When he's the face of the regime, everyone wants gone. How does that work? If it wasn't about Maduro directly, who was it about?
Russia. Tenenbaum connects it directly to the larger battle with Russia, particularly concerning Ukraine. He suggests Russia was, posturing, maybe raising the stakes by cozying up to China and North Korea.
Okay.
And the U.S. response, in this view, was to hit Russia where it hurts by targeting its allies, starting with Venezuela. Tenenbaum saw it as the first move in a wider strategy.
So squeeze Russia's friends to put pressure on Moscow.
Exactly. He even speculated that Nicaragua and Cuba would be the next phase in that campaign. So the actions against Venezuela were less about immediate regime change in Caracas and more about leverage in the bigger game with Russia.
So that whole military siege narrative, Tenenbaum sees it as more symbolic, a strategic message.
Pretty much. His conclusion was stark. Only a threat, nothing more than that. A calculated move on the global chessboard, not a direct assault aimed at toppling Maduro right then and there.
This reframing connects to other incidents too, right? Like that dispute over the sunken boat, the one linked to the Tren de Aragua gang. Maduro denied it happened, blamed AI.
Right. Maduro claimed Senator Rubio fabricated a video using AI. Classic deflection.
And Tenenbaum's take on that?
Completely cynical, but maybe realistic. He just says, of course it's true, meaning the boat sank. And then he asks, what do you expect Maduro to say? Like, of course he's going to lie. It's what dictators do.
He doesn't mince words about Maduro himself, does he?
Not at all. He calls him a dangerous clown. Un payaso peligroso.
Yeah.
But he immediately adds the crucial part. This clown is holding an entire people without freedom.
So ridiculous maybe, but still dangerous and oppressive.
Precisely. He sees the absurdity, but never loses sight of the very real human cost of the regime. It forces you to look past the noise and see the deeper geopolitical games and the grim reality for ordinary Venezuelans.
Okay, so if the U.S. actions weren't really about toppling Maduro directly, and given the terrible situation inside of Venezuela, the big question remains, when does Maduro fall? When does democracy come back? People have been asking this for years.
It's the question everyone wants answered.
And Tenenbaum's answer is, well, it's incredibly bleak.
It really is.
Yeah.
His prediction is simply never.
Never. Just flat out.
Flat out. He says he sees no constellation of factors, internal or external, that would lead to Maduro's downfall. He just doesn't see a pathway for it to happen.
Wow. That just crushes any sense of hope, doesn't it? What about the Venezuelan people? Can't they rise up? Or what about other countries stepping in?
He's equally pessimistic there. He believes the Venezuelan people cannot do anything because they've tried to do everything already and failed. They're effectively suppressed. And his analysis of the U.S. strategy suggests he doesn't see serious appetite for external intervention focused purely on regime change either.
So, if the people are stuck and outsiders aren't really focused on removing him, what makes Maduro so resilient? What's holding his regime together, according to Tenenbaum?
It's a combination of things, really deeply interwoven. First, crucial external support. Cuba, Russia, China, they provide lifelines, money, weapons, intelligence. They keep him afloat.
Okay, powerful friends. What else?
Second, the dictatorship is just very deeply ingrained within Venezuela itself. It's not just Maduro at the top. The whole system, the military, the courts, local structures.
Yeah.
It's all controlled. Muy metidas adentro, as he says.
Right, deep institutional control.
And third, and this is maybe the most insidious part, he talks about a symbiotic relationship.
Symbiotic, meaning the regime and some part of the population depend on each other.
Exactly. He explains that the people who manage to live well today in Venezuela, not the super rich, but ordinary people getting by, are often those who depend on him, his party, and his people.
How does that work practically? Patronage.
Yes, a massive system of patronage. Jobs, food handouts, housing access. It all flows through regime loyalty. So a significant number of people have their basic survival tied directly to Maduro staying in power. They won't challenge him because they depend on the system he controls.
So it creates its own base of support out of necessity.
Precisely. He compares it to some political machines in Argentina, but says in Venezuela it's completely institutionalized. It's woven into the fabric of society, making opposition incredibly hard because you're not just fighting the state, you're fighting the system that keeps many people fed.
That's a deeply cynical but maybe accurate view of how these regimes survive. Does he point to other examples?
He often brings up Cuba. In power since 1961, he notes maybe 80 years, 70 years, depending on how you count. It's endured decades of pressure. Yeah.
For
For Tenenbaum, it's proof that these systems can last indefinitely once entrenched.
So his final word on Maduro is just grim acceptance.
Pretty much. He says the chances of Maduro falling are quite small. Bastante chiquitas.
Mhm.
He's had this conversation many times, he says, and always concludes, Maduro will not fall no matter if there are elections or not. He is a dictator. It really forces you to confront the resilience of authoritarianism and how hard it is to restore democracy once it's truly dismantled.
Okay, this next part is, well, it's a real shift. After all that dense analysis of global politics, power plays, dictatorships, Mookie Tenenbaum pivots completely. He starts talking about his own personal beliefs, his philosophy, and it's quite radical.
It is. It's fascinating because it stands in such stark contrast to his detailed, objective analysis of world affairs. He draws a very clear line between Tenenbaum the analyst and Mookie the individual.
And his individual stance starts with something really fundamental to many societies, voting.
Yeah. He just comes right out and says it, I don't vote, period. He says he doesn't believe in voting and that for him, it makes no sense to vote.
Yeah. Makes no sense. That's a perspective you don't hear every day, especially stated so bluntly. What's his reasoning? Why dismiss something seen as a core civic duty?
His reasoning is purely practical, almost ruthlessly so. He argues that his individual vote does not change the result. The outcome of an election, with millions voting, isn't affected by his single ballot.
So it's about individual impact, or lack thereof.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He asks, why go to vote if it won't tangibly alter anything? He's focused entirely on the practical effect of his one action, and he sees none. Any symbolic value, any collective idea that doesn't factor into his personal calculation.
But the obvious question then is, what if everyone felt that way? Wouldn't the whole system collapse? Does he address that?
He does, but dismissively. He clarifies he's not creating a religious movement calling people not to vote. It's not a call to action. He just says, Mookie doesn't vote, and then everyone does what they want.
So it's purely a personal stance, not a political argument he expects others to adopt.
Right. He sees voting as an act of symbolism, and he flatly states, I don't do symbolic acts. His focus is on what he considers concrete reality. And it goes even further. When asked directly, what would democracy be? His answer is startling.
What does he say?
He just says, I don't know what democracy is.
Wow. So he doesn't even engage with the concept on a theoretical level.
Well, apparently not, at least not in that personal context. He stresses again, these are his personal views. I, Mookie, do not vote, never have, never will. Completely separate from his analysis of how countries actually operate. It definitely makes you pause and think about why we vote, doesn't it? Is it practical impact, symbolism, duty?
It really does. Okay,
Yeah.
So if he rejects the symbolic act of voting and questions the very definition of democracy, where does that leave him on, like the bigger questions, the meaning of life stuff?
Ah, yes. This is where it gets even more profound and maybe, as you said, apocalyptic. When asked directly, what is your purpose in life? His answer is just as direct and uncompromising as his views on voting.
Okay, I'm bracing myself. What does he say?
He says, I have no purpose in life. And then adds, nobody has purpose in life.
Nobody. So no inherent meaning, no grand design, and nothing.
Nothing. He completely rejects the idea of purpose as anything other than maybe a human invention, something we tell ourselves. It's not inherent to existence itself in his view.
That's incredibly stark. Does he have a way of summing up this existential view, a core phrase?
He does. And it's memorable, maybe chilling. He says, we come alone to this world, we suffer alone, and we die alone, and the rest is filler.
The rest is filler. Wow, so relationships, work, joy, society, just filler around the core experience of solitary suffering and death.
That's how it sounds. It strips away almost everything we usually use to define a meaningful life. It's brutal in its simplicity.
Afterwards, what happens then? Does he offer any thought on that? Y después.
His answer is just one word. Nothing. Después nada. Complete finality. No afterlife, no continuation, just the end.
And he's okay with describing this view as apocalyptic. He doesn't shy away from that label.
Not at all. He agrees with it. He owns it. It's not presented as something negative to him, just the way it is.
So why? Why adopt such a seemingly bleak philosophy? Does it offer him anything? Comfort? Security?
He frames it as a conscious choice.
Yeah.
A way of thinking and being in life that I chose. And crucially, he says, it makes me feel more secure.
More secure. How does believing life is purposeless suffering make one feel secure?
Perhaps by removing the possibility of disappointment, or by providing a kind of bedrock certainty, even if that certainty is negative. He emphasizes it's not just intellectual, it's something he thinks and feels. It's his chosen framework, his personal anchor in a chaotic world, maybe protecting him from illusions.
It's certainly a perspective that forces you to confront your own beliefs about purpose and meaning head on. A real moment for self-reflection, hearing something that direct. Hashtag, tag, tag, outre.
So we really covered some ground there. We went through Mookie Tenenbaum's sharp, often unsettling takes, his view of China's power as theater facing this huge tech crisis.
The chip barrier. Right. And then his absolute conviction about Maduro's dictatorship in Venezuela being basically permanent, propped up by that symbiotic relationship.
And finally, diving into his really personal, unconventional philosophy, rejecting voting, rejecting purpose, that stark we suffer alone worldview. It's a lot to take in.
It really is. Across all these different topics, though, there's this consistent thread in his analysis, isn't there? This drive to look beneath the surface, to question the accepted narratives.
Definitely. He challenges you constantly to reconsider power, alliances, technology, even just individual action. He forces you to confront uncomfortable possibilities.
So, thinking about all this, what stands out most to you listening right now? How does Tenenbaum's skepticism, his almost clinical view of things, maybe challenge your assumptions about global power, about technology's path, about whether your vote matters, or even about the meaning you find in life?
It's definitely thought-provoking, and it leaves us with a final, pretty provocative question to chew on.
Okay, what's that?
Well, if Tenenbaum is right, or even partly right, if individual actions like voting don't really change the big picture, and if life itself lacks inherent purpose beyond, suffering and ending alone, what then is the value of it all? Why bother with collective action, with striving, with building things, with engaging in these complex global issues he analyzes?
Right. What meaning do we actually construct for ourselves when faced with a worldview like that? And maybe just as importantly, why do we construct it? Why do we seek purpose or collective good if it's all just filler?
Exactly. Something to think about long after this deep dive is over.